How to identify your machine's network connections. Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. Our machines are pretty much constantly connected to the internet these days. What that means is that the software running on your machine can also be connected to remote servers and services, either constantly or as needed, and probably with a little indication. I'll show you a few ways to see exactly what your machine is up to, using both built-in and free tools. Now, the first thing we need to understand is what the IP address of our machine is. We're going to do that by running Windows command prompt and running the command ipconfig. One of the things included is the IPv4 address. In this case, 192.168.1.185. We need to know this simply so that we can filter it out from some of the other results we might see, because we're going to be seeing this IP address a lot because it's the machine we're talking about. And to be clear, this specific IP address is the IP address of this machine on my local network. It has nothing to do with the internet. Since I'm behind a router, the router is providing what's called NAT, or Network Address Translation. You'll need to use a tool like whatismyip.com to see the IP address that your router is actually presenting all of this to the internet as. All right, the first thing we're going to use is a tool called Netstat. With the option that I'm going to use, we need to run this in an administrative command prompt. So I'll go ahead and close this window real quick and fire up terminal admin. The command is going to be netstat with the -B option. -B is what actually kicks us into needing this to be an administrator prompt, because what it's going to do is it's going to show us the programs that are actually associated with each of the connections we've made. Make this window a little bigger, and you can see we've got a bunch of different things going on here. For example, I've got something that is connected to a local address. 127.0.0.1 is another of those special addresses. That is the machine talking to itself. By definition, 127.0.0.1 is the machine itself. So if I'm connecting from a program to 127.0.0.1, it literally is the program running on that machine talking to some other process on that same machine. In this case, Bridge is a program that's running that is allowing me to access my Proton email through another interface. That other interface, well, that's Thunderbird, and you can see I've got Thunderbird here several times connected to, again, the machine itself. Also, I've got OneDrive running here. It's connected from our IP address to 20.59.87.225. Sometimes Netstat is able to turn that into reverse DNS. Remember, askleo.com is a name, but that's associated with an IP address. What we're seeing here is an IP address. Sometimes Netstat will actually be able to give you the name associated with that IP address. In this case, it was unable to. If you look a little further down, you can see in the next one is MS Edge Web View, basically Edge. This one is actually giving us an actual domain name, not an IP address. Although it looks like an IP address, it's got dashes and it's got letters in it, so you know that it's a domain name. I've got Thunderbird connected to a number of different things. I've got Edge connected to a number of different things. I've got background task host. I honestly have no idea what that is, but you can see that it is connected to this other IP address out on the internet. Bridge, some more Edge, some more Thunderbird, and some more Edge. So you can see on this machine, where indeed you can see down in the taskbar, I am in fact running Thunderbird. I am in fact running Proton Mail Bridge, which is actually over here in the notification area. That represents what this machine is doing. Now, unfortunately, many of these IP addresses and domain names aren't particularly helpful. There are a couple of things you can do. One is take the IP address to a service like whois.domaintools.com, and that will show you where that IP address is located. In fact, let's actually do that here with this one, this 52.96.113.242. I have no idea what that is. All right, we'll go over to whois.domaintools.com. We'll paste in that IP address. And you can see here that this is in fact owned by Microsoft. We don't know what it's doing, but we do know that it is connected to a Microsoft server. If you take a look at the article that comes with this video out at askleo.com/190089, you'll see I've got a couple of other examples. There's one example that I thought would be an interesting one to work through a little bit. It's a connection to something called edge-dgw-shv-01-SEA5. Those are really, really common domain names for the kind of connections you might find here in Netstat. I asked Claude AI to tell me, what the heck is this? And it actually gives me a great breakdown. Edge DGW SHV 01 SEA5 is a server belonging to Meta, Facebook. Here's a breakdown of what that name actually means. Edge means it's an edge server, meaning it sits at the outer edge of Facebook's network, close to the users to make the connections faster. To be clear, this is not related to Microsoft Edge in any way. DGW stands for Data Gateway, a server that handles data routing or connections. SHV 01 is just internal server numbering, server number 1 in this group. SEA5 is a location code for Seattle, Washington, data center number 5. So, the full domain would be edge-dgw-shv-01-SEA5.facebook.com. And it's one of hundreds of similar servers Facebook operates worldwide to handle traffic for Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and other meta services. In other words, on that machine, at that time, my Chrome browser had an open connection to Facebook. The information out of Netstat is pretty dense, and understanding each connection can take significant research. But one of the things I did that I thought was a really interesting thing, and if you're into using AI at all, I might recommend this if you're curious, is I took the full Netstat-B output and gave it to Claude Code AI, and I asked it for an analysis. And on that machine, it gave me a fascinating breakdown of what's happening on that machine. That was my real desktop machine, and it runs a lot of things. The Netstat list that we got just here is probably more typical, but mine had many, many connections, over 350. And Claude did a really nice analysis of what the various groups of connections were. So if you're interested, here's an image of the output that Claude gave me, but you'll find more information again over in the article associated with this video, askleo.com/190089. All right, that's Netstat. Netstat is included in Windows, so you don't have to add any third-party software. However, as we've seen, Netstat can be pretty dense, pretty obscure. Another tool you might consider using is something that is part of the sysinternals toolset. The sysinternals suite, I've referenced it before because it contains other tools that I often refer to, such as Process Explorer, Process Monitor, and others. Includes a tool called TCPView. So if you haven't, sysinternals suite at the Microsoft Store, go ahead and install that. That will then give you something called TCPView, TCPView, and we'll run it. Of course, there's always a license agreement to agree to. Now, what we've got here is another view on the connections being made by this machine out to the internet and other machines on the network. I'm going to suggest a couple of tweaks. One, in the options menu, down here, make sure that it has resolve addresses turned on. That's that thing where it's taking the IP addresses and resolving them, turning them into the real domain names of what it's connecting to, if it can. In this case, desktop.f9, etc. is the name of this machine. So the local address, well, desktop.f9 9 whatever is the local machine's name. But if we take a look at the remote address, you can see that it's connecting to a number of different things. We've got a bunch of those obscure domain names. We've got IP addresses that it could not turn into real domain names. Yeah, there's imap.fastmail.com, one of the connections that Thunderbird is maintaining as it is accessing email for me. So here you can see exactly what you're connected to. Now, we've got 113 endpoints. These are the programs that are actually doing things. You can see exactly who's connecting to what. One of the things that is useful to do is to widen this up a little bit and take a look at the column 4. I'll say sent bytes. Now, I just clicked on that column header. I'm going to click on it again so that it is sorted with the process that is sending the most data at the top of the list. And in this case, yeah, it's Bridge, then OneDrive, then Edge. I have no idea what they're doing, but this will tell you who's sending things over your network connections. TCPView is, as you can see, kind of a more readable version of the same information that you can get out of Netstat. The cost, if you will, is that you need to download and install the tool. And by the way, the reason the things are changing is this is being updated in real time. Colors mean that connections are coming and going, but this is what's happening on the machine right now. All right, a different tool that is included in your Windows, but it doesn't have quite the same information as TCPView, is Resource Monitor. Fire that up. I'm going to go directly to the Network tab so that we're focused on network activity only. Make it bigger. And you can see here are processes with network activity. And again, I've got this sorted by sending by bytes per second, so you can see who's sending the most. Here it's MS Edge and Service Host, Bridge, basically the same candidates that we saw earlier. Network activity is showing us what's going on specific connections in real time. The top pane is showing you what an application is doing across all of the network connections it has. Network activity is showing you individual network connections. So you can see here that Edge has multiple different connections to multiple different sites, and each one of those is doing different things. TCP connections are, in fact, those network connections that are established but may not actually be transmitting any data. This is very common for a connection to be left open so that each side can communicate to the other should they need to. But again, it's giving you a summary of what is happening on your machine. It doesn't have the level of detail of TCPView, but it's a very quick way to identify perhaps which applications are making use of your network. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed at the amount and the kind of data presented by these tools, do not feel bad. Unless you're an experienced network engineer, and to be clear, I am not. This is just as confusing to me at times. It definitely presents as very complex, very obscure, and very dense. But when we use these tools, we're often looking for a culprit, an application hogging the network perhaps. And that's often quickly determined in tools like Resource Monitor or TCPView simply by sorting based on the various activity columns and seeing which application rises to the top. If you're trying to determine where a program running on your machine is connecting, you'll often be faced with naked IP addresses or obscure domain names. Again, additional research will be required. In the case of IP addresses, you can use a Whois service like I showed you earlier, or in the case of obscure domain names, then well, honestly, tools like Claude AI can often provide a very useful analysis and breakdown. When it comes to AI, remember that AI is not infallible, for there were definitely some less important details of my larger analysis that Claude actually got wrong. The one thing I want to point out, though, is that I want you to not assume malware or a hack just because you see a connection you don't understand. Yeah, malware can show up, but it is way, way more common for obscure connections to be completely legitimate, even though they might be difficult to identify. If you're looking for malware, Running scans with your anti-malware tools instead is a much more reliable approach than trying to identify some random network connection. So, if you haven't already, installing sysinternal tools is a simple and safe thing to do. Not only will you get TCPView, but you'll also get other tools that I reference from time to time, like Process Explorer, Autoruns, and a few others. Whichever tool you use, it might make sense to have a look at your system's network connections when you're not diagnosing a problem, so you've got some sense for what normal looks like. You might not have 350 network connections as I do on my primary desktop machine, but I'm guessing you'll have more than you expect. I can almost guarantee it, actually. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit askleo.com/190089. I'm Leo Notenboom, and this is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.